When it comes to James Bond films, we love the cars, the gadgets, and the babes, but of course it's Bond's sophistication and sleekness that makes the series last so long. But many of our favorite James Bond films were an utter disaster during production. Let's find out more. 6 months to and from Russia. Because of the complex stories, gadgets, and scenic locations James Bond films have, you can imagine it can take several months or even over a year to complete a film. But what if you only had 6 months? This is what happened with the second Bond film, From Russia with Love. The first Bond film, Dr. No, released in 1962, was an incredible success. Audiences simply weren't going to wait too long to see another one. They were hooked. Before production even began, there was already a release date. The release date was literally 6 months after production began. So they had 6 months to make a film where Bond leaves England, spends time in Turkey, meets a Russian spy, and, well, we won't spoil it all. Here are some issues that occurred. A boat full of cameras sank and even 007 couldn't save them. Pedro Armendáriz played one of the main supporting roles as Ali Kerim Bey. Sadly, he was diagnosed with lung cancer during the shoot and had to stop working. It was released after his passing and became one of his most famous roles. But with these challenges, they managed to complete the film, and it's widely considered to be one of the best Bond films ever. How Connery became Bond. While we all have our favorite Bond, we'll always pay homage to the one who started it all, Sir Sean Connery. Well, actually, he wasn't the first Bond. As we know, the James Bond character came from a series of novels written by Sir Ian Fleming. He lived such a colorful life, we might say he was the first Bond. But the first adaptation of a James Bond story was a 1954 TV film called Casino Royale. The short 1-hour film was pretty faithful to the novel except a few things. The main distinction was James Bond became Jimmy Bond, and he was an American. The film wasn't a particular success story and was by no means a flop. It garnered enough interest to take the James Bond character to the cinema. Eventually, Albert Broccoli decided to produce a feature film based on Dr. No. Sean Connery wasn't the initial choice, but he was the only one left after actor Patrick McGoohan left. There were doubts, and many felt it was an utter disaster to have an unknown and rather rough actor playing the suave Bond. But they were wrong, and Sir Sean Connery will always have a special place in the hearts of Bond fans. You only live twice, but you have to shoot again and again. The Bond film You Only Live Twice went through so many issues, one wonders if Bond thought about taking his PPK and throwing it away. For example, by this time, Sean Connery had become such a star that the paparazzi followed him around during the shoot. He found it hard to concentrate and became sick of the constant attention. In fact, once a journalist literally followed him to the bogs to ask a question. This caused him to become sick of the role, and it was one of the reasons why he eventually decided to stop playing Bond. The film was shot partially in Japan. One controversy arrived when Sean Connery made a comment that was mistranslated in the Japanese press. He apparently had said that Japanese women weren't sexy. He said it during an interview after a long and exhausting day at work. It was also on the set that he began to worry about typecasting. The final battle sequence of the film was so complex that almost every stunt performer in the country was required to work on it. Complaints from the producers about rising costs almost shut the whole production down. These are just some of the issues that caused this production to be an utter disaster. Some others included Sean Connery's wife having to dive underwater because the Japanese actress couldn't dive, or she apparently didn't feel like due to an illness, so the real-life Mrs. James Bond was a body double. Nancy Sinatra took 25 attempts to record the title song for the film. This annoyed producers so much they even considered replacing her. But the film was made and it was a hit. But Sean Connery was quite fed up with the role. He still acted in Diamonds Are Forever, but after that he decided to call it quits on James Bond. On Her Majesty's Secret Service. This is perhaps the most controversial and debated of all the James Bond films. It's considered a masterpiece by some and the worst of the lot by others. And as you can expect, things weren't always so easy behind the scenes. This was George Lazenby's only James Bond film. The first disaster was that many on set felt that, as an actor, he simply didn't have the class that Sean Connery had. He seemed rather bumbling and not intimidating as an actor. This became the belief once the film was released and is one of the reasons why he was fired and replaced by Sir Roger Moore. Dame Diana Rigg hated working with Lazenby, and this apparently led to many issues between the two. During the scenes where Lazenby pretended to be Sir Hilary Bray, it was decided that the actor George Baker would eventually dub over the lines. This led to the belief that George Lazenby couldn't be Bond or Bray. Yet, upon reflection, the film has survived the test of time and is still considered essential viewing. Some directors, like Christopher Nolan, have actually stated it as the best Bond film. The Spy Who Loved Me. This film has become one of the greatest films in the James Bond franchise, but that doesn't mean everything went well behind the scenes. The producers, Harry Saltzman and Cubby Broccoli, had such quarrels behind the scenes, it almost caused their company to go bankrupt. In fact, the quarrels and the rowing became so intense, everyone thought the production would be shut down. The script was written and rewritten many times because the producers were never satisfied. In fact, at one point, Anthony Burgess, who wrote A Clockwork Orange, wrote the script, and another time, John Landis, of all people, wrote the script. The same happened with directors. At one point, Steven Spielberg was considered, but he was extremely busy with a film about some giant shark attacking people. Heard of it? Eventually, Louis Gilbert was chosen. His previous experience was with You Only Live Twice, which already has issues, as we've talked about. People might have thought they had gone mad hiring old Gilbert, but the film was a hit. It was an utter disaster, but thankfully, it was a success. Octopussy. One of the most exhilarating James Bond films is Octopussy, and this is largely due to being filmed in the hustle and bustle of India. But this is also what caused the film to be a disaster during production. In fact, on set, Roger Moore had heat stroke due to the intense heat in the region of India where they were filming. It took forever to find the right Bond girl for this film, and over 20 actresses gave screen tests, all of them apparently being awful. Eventually, Maud Adams, who was in The Man with the Golden Gun, was chosen. The original character from the novel was an Indian woman, so the script had to be rewritten to explain why a non-Indian woman was literally living in an Indian palace. And this was just one of the issues with the script. While Bond seldom misses when he's firing his gun, it took several attempts to come up with a decent script for this film. Even when shooting began, no one was satisfied entirely with the script. Fortunately for them, the film was a major success. As you can see, Bond always delivers, but sometimes the route isn't always as easy. The James Bond films have been in our cinemas for over 60 years, and we don't expect it to stop anytime soon. The contemporary films also had issues, with Quantum of Solace being delayed due to the writer's strike, and Spectre having issues when its script was leaked. But no matter what obstacles come his way, we can still trust Bond to get the mission accomplished in time for a nice glass of martini, shaken, not stirred. Now it's time to hear from you. Were you surprised to hear about the chaos of filming these famous films? Let us know in the comments section below.